Welcome back. Let's take you to this now. Buffelsfontein Gold Mine, the owner of the controversial Stilfontein mine, has denied government's assertion that the company is responsible for rescue operations. According to Times Live, these details emerged from an urgent application filed at the Constitutional Court by an NGO called the Mining Affected Communities United in Action. Joining us is David van Wyk, senior researcher at Benchmarks Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. van Wyk, in just explaining who is really responsible in the situation. So maybe you can perhaps begin by telling us how due diligence defined in the context of mine closure is, and what obligations do mining companies have to ensure that the safety and the security of the abandoned mines that are closed?
Well, I think that first and foremost, there's a problem here because the Buffelsfontein mine is an operational mine. It's not a closed mine. That particular shaft is not operational, but the mine itself in the area is still operational and it's still with an owner. So at this point, the owner would not require a mine closure certificate, as would be the case otherwise. But normally, and so I think that the Makua Lawyers for Human Rights case is not too strong because they're focusing on the wrong issues. What they should be focusing on is the fact that mining is a national competency and that the provincial government actually has no say in the matter. It is a national department issue according to the Constitution. The second thing is that, therefore, the police also really have no say in this matter. It's a DMRE issue because it's a mining issue, so that is what they should have made the argument around rather than around mine closure, because that is an operational mine. It doesn't need to be closed now. However, if a mine is closed, you should really have, according to the law, evidence of proper reclamation. You should have environmental compliance reports. You should have a closure certificate from the Department of Mineral Resources. You should have a rehabilitation completion report. You should have land use approval from the local government, and you should have a water quality certificate to indicate that the mine, the water situation at the mine is under control and that underground water and surface water won't be polluted into the future.
So in your opinion then, with what you've just said, who should bear the responsibility for retrieving those illegal miners that are underground? I mean, does the law even just apportion the responsibilities between the DMRE and Buffelsfontein?
Well, the Constitution apportions responsibility to the government as a whole, in the sense that the right to life is guaranteed, regardless of whether you are suspected to be a criminal or not. The right to food is guaranteed. The right to water is guaranteed, regardless of whether you are suspected to be a criminal or not. Otherwise, we won't have jails. We would simply just starve the prisoners that we have found guilty of a crime. In this instance, no one has been found guilty of a crime as yet. And, the shaft is abandoned, but you can find those people guilty of trespassing in the sense that it's an operational mine and they are trespassing on the Buffelsfontein property at this particular stage.
So in accordance to this article, I mean, you say that this is still an operational mine, but the Deputy State Attorney claims that the sixth respondent, which is BGM, operated until 2015 and that no closure certificate had been issued to them. So in this instance, has this mine been left abandoned?
Well, I think that this is a shaft of a mine. A mining operation normally has a lot of shafts. In this case, 12 or 14 shafts. In the case of Crown mines, that's as many as 20 shafts. So you might make one shaft inoperable because you're no longer extracting anything from it, while the other shafts are still operating. Okay, so usually the Department of Mineral Resources would issue a mine closure certificate once all the shafts have stopped operating, because it's a single mining license that has been issued to the mine, Buffelsfontein, with all its 12 or 13 shafts that are there, rather than having a mining license per shaft. Okay, so these workers are stuck in a specific shaft of an operation that still is under license with Buffelsfontein. Now, I think that there is a humanitarian crisis. I think that the government has a responsibility to extract those people from underground, especially if it wants to actually charge them with any criminal activity, because so long as they are underground, they can't be charged. And therefore, you wonder why the government is reluctant to extract them.
So now, BGM has rejected the claim in the response to Makua in the application that they have filed. What stance do they have in this case?
Well, I think that the argument would be that that particular shaft was not operational, but that the mine itself is still under license, and therefore, it is only once all the shafts have been closed down that they should be having mine closure. And you can't have a mine closure certificate unless you have rehabilitated the land properly, unless you have made sure that there is total environmental compliance, that you've got water quality reports, land use approval, and things like that, the things I mentioned right at the outset. What they could have done is they could have fenced off the area properly and prevented access in the first instance by having proper security and proper notices and so on up around that mine.
In your experience, do you believe that the Department of Minerals is sufficiently playing their part in efficiently overseeing mines in South Africa, whether it's in the closure or the current running of these mines?
Not at all. The thing that really worries me is that after the Jagersfontein disaster, suddenly tailings facilities became dams, and they are not dams. They are mine waste storage facilities. And the minister ducked his responsibility in that instance by quickly saying, oh no, this is a responsibility of water affairs. In this instance, he's ducked the responsibility by saying, oh no, this is a criminal issue. It's not an issue for the DMRE. But if the DMRE had ensured that this mine was properly secured, signposted, and access to the mine absolutely not possible, then this tragedy would not have taken place. So the DMRE is dead silent on this particular issue. I've seen police commissioners, I've seen provincial MECs who have nothing to do with mining, and in the constitution it's not in their competence, all coming on the media, but I've not seen the Minister of Mineral Resources.
Lastly, Mr. Van Wyk, I mean, the case will be heard in the Court. How might this case set a precedent for future mines in South Africa in terms of how they're handled, how they're closed, and what implications could it have for other mining companies and the regulatory framework?
Well, as we said just after the Marikana massacre, the government needs to have a commission of inquiry into mining as a whole in South Africa, because it's a mess. And since 2012, we have seen one crisis situation after another crisis situation developing around mining. And so hopefully this particular incident will lead to a rethink on mining, with the creation of the necessary working groups and so on to plan for the proper rehabilitation of mines, the proper repurposing and re-engineering of mines, so that we don't have these failed mines, failed communities, and this massive unemployment crisis and inequality crisis that we are faced with in the country as we are facing at the moment. So I really think that I hope that this particular incident will lead to a rethink and get people around the table to actually engage properly, civil society, NGOs, the mining companies, the government of national unity, everyone participating to ensure that we actually work out a strategy that can avoid this kind of thing.
All right, David, thank you so much for your time and for your analysis and insights into this issue around the Court that's to hear the due diligence around the Stilfontein mine and who is responsible for the retrieval of those illegal miners that are still underground.